Hi everyone, today I'm going to show you how I can create this abstract loop in Blender, so let's get started. First let's hit Shift A and add a plane, go to Geometry Nodes and close this window. Now click on New and delete the group input. Add a volume cube, Alt Shift click it and add a volume to mesh. This one. Put it here and set it to amount. Now let's add an integral. Plug that into the resolution here. And let's also plug it in here. I'm going to set it to 64 for now, but I'm going to increase it later. Now we need a mix RGB node. Put it here and plug it into the density. And add a wave texture. Plug the color into the color 1 and the vector. Now duplicate it and add a brick texture. Put it here and set the scale to 0.16. Plug the color into the scale. Now plug this color into the vector, and by the way, let's set this to diagonal and to saw. And let's set this one to diagonal as well. Set the scale here to 1.48 and the distortion to 6.7. Add a gradient texture. Set it to spherical and plug the color into the mortar and into the vector here. We need 2 more nodes here, so let's add a set shade smooth node. Put it here and a set material node. Go to the material properties and click on new and select it. Now we need a position node. Put it here and plug it into the color 2. Now add a separate XYZ node and a combine XYZ node. Add a math node and set it to smooth minimum. Take this X here and plug it into this side. Add a math node again. And let's set it to multiply and use the set for the second value and duplicate it. Now grab these nodes and move them over here. And set this to minus 11.23. Duplicate the multiply and set it to subtract. Now open the timeline, make sure you're on frame 1 and keyframe this value. Go to frame 251 or skip a frame if you change the end frame. Now set this to 50.5 and keyframe it again. Now if we press play, we've got something like this. Duplicate the multiply again and set it to sine. And let's duplicate it again and set it to modulo. Set the value here to 2.1. Next let's grab the y and plug it into the x. Duplicate one of the math nodes and put it here. Drag this down and let's set it to sig. Now again duplicate it and set it to minimum. And set the value here to minus 0.78. Now duplicate it again and set it to seal. Now take the Z and plug it into the Y. Duplicate the multiply node and put it here and set the value to 4.5. Duplicate it again and set the value to 1.32 and set it to divide. Now let's set it to power and leave the value here and duplicate it again. Now let's set it to round. Let's save now. Now I recommend that you set this anywhere between 64 and 256. That's where I just saved because this requires a lot of processing power. By the way, if you want to get this display here, you just have to go up here and enable timing. By the way, I also recommend that you don't press play as long as it's this high, because it will lag a lot. Now let's go to shading. Go to rendered view. I'm going to use Cyclist because I'm going to use a glass shader. As always, you can find a link to the HDRI in the description. Now go to the render properties, go to film and enable transparent and transparent glass. Let's also go to color management and set the look to very high contrast. Now delete the principal BSDF and just add a glass shader and plug it into the surface. Back in the mode, let's add a point light and set the radius to somewhere around here. Go to rendered view and set the color to something orange, for example, or something red, and set the power to 500. Go back into viewport shading and select the plane and press delete on the numpad and 1. Now press 6 on the numpad 3 times and 2 once. Hit Shift A to add a camera and Ctrl Alt 0 to go into camera view and G set to move it on the local Z axis. Hit Shift A again and add an empty plane axis and go to snapping and face project. Now if we press G and Ctrl, it will all snap to the faces. So I'm going to position it around here. Now let's set this back to increment. Go up here and enable depth of field and select the camera. Now enable depth of field here and select the empty. I think I'm going to leave it at 2.8 and set the blades to 16. Let's save again and go to the render properties. I'm going to render at 128 samples with denoise enabled. If you can, I recommend that you use optics. Now go to compositing, enable use nodes, add a denoise node set to accurate, and enable denoising data here. Go to the output properties and change the resolution if you want to. I'm going to set this to JPEG because the file size is smaller. The only downside to that is that the image won't actually be transparent. The transparent part will be black, but that's okay. Now set the quality to 100%. Now go here and select an output folder. I called mine rendered images, and now let's call the files rendered images as well. You can of course call them whatever you want. If you put an underscore after the name, Blender is going to automatically assign numbers to the frames. Now let's click on accept and save again. Now go to render and render animation. Now that it's done rendering, close this window and go to video editing. Make sure you are on frame 1 and hover over the file location and copy it. You can do that by pressing Ctrl C and hit Shift A, image sequence. Now go to the folder where you have the files, delete the name here and hit enter. Press A and enter, and now let's set this to FFmpeg video. Go to encoding and set the container to MPEG 4. Now go down here and set the output quality to high quality. Let's save again and go to render and render animation. So that's it with the tutorial. I hope you liked it. Please let me know what I should do next and I'll see you next time.